Hello, welcome and bonjour to our colleagues across Canada. Just give a moment as folks are joining the call, and we'll get started very shortly. Okay, we're already up to 30. So welcome. Thank you for joining us for the second Bridging the Gap to St. John's webinar series from CEWIL. My name is Erin Kuipeinen. I'm a senior specialist in experiential learning at the University of Calgary. I'm also on the CEWIL board as the Alberta representative. I use the she, her, or they, them pronouns. And I'm very grateful to live and work on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 in southern Alberta. Knowing that we're all calling in from different places, I'd like to take the time and space to acknowledge the original owners, stewards, and caretakers of Turtle Island and the lands upon which we gather today. If you don't know the Indigenous territories on which you're located, I'll pop a link in the chat for nativeland.ca. This is a great resource that allows you to get to know those territories. It's not perfect, but it is a great resource to start to locate ourselves on the land of its original owners. Today's session is part of a broader series hosted by CEWIL, brought to you by the professional development and the conference committees. And by way of introducing yourselves, I encourage you to take a moment to pop your name, your institution, and your role and the traditional territories on which you're located into the chat. And while you're doing that, I'll just quickly go through some logistics before turning things over to our presenters today. So we're using the regular Zoom meeting format today. Feel free to leave your camera on or off, but please ensure that you are muted unless you're asking a question. I'm joined by my colleague Nicole Natarasny from Lakeland College and the PD committee of CEWIL, and Nicole is going to monitor the chat and help facilitate the Q&A at the end. You'll notice that today's session is being recorded, so we will circulate a link to the recording to our presenters as well as to those who registered for the session shortly after our webinar. We'll also circulate a link for a survey for feedback to inform future professional development offerings from CEWIL. If you experience any tech challenges, Andrew Gutt from Redstone, CEWIL's Management Association, is on the line to help us with any tech challenges. Please pop those in the chat. And I am going to turn things over here shortly to our presenters. We have two presentations from Ontario today, one from Humber College and one from Brock University. Kicking us off first is Derek Stockley and Karina Ivory from Humber, and they're speaking about the evolution of WIL. Derek is the Senior Dean for the Faculty of Social and Community Services and the Principal of the Lakeshore Campus at Humber College. Karina is the Manager of Placements and Partnerships for the Faculty of Social and Community Services and WIL at Humber. Then we'll turn things over to Brock. Christine Eaton and Laura Fife will present on redefining co-op work term reflection. Christine is an innovative career development consultant and facilitates the co-op professional prep course at Brock. Laura is a skills translation coordinator and supports students in making meaningful connections between skills education and the consistently evolving labor market. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to our colleagues, Derek and Karina from Humber.
Thanks so much, Erin and Nicole, for having us here. And thanks everyone for taking the time out of your afternoons to join us. I'd like to acknowledge that Humber College, where we're located, is part of the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. So I'll throw over to Karina to say hello as well.
Hi everyone, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world today. Pleasure to be here. As Derek mentioned, I'm Karina. I'm the Placements and Partnership Manager, and really excited today to share with all of you our own journey of how we adapted work integrated learning from a traditional model where students were working on set tasks with an employer to what we are currently experiencing, which is an expansion of access and opportunity for students faculty and partners to co-create meaningful experiences when it comes to work integrated learning. So today in our session, we're going to be sharing visual examples with you of the resources Humber created, and we're going to end the session with personal insights about our journey and experience, and welcome any questions that you have and comments in the chat or after the second presenters also.
So I'm going to start off by providing the context. I know that all of you have lived through this as well, but I think it's important to remind ourselves what happened in the beginning, because it really does lend itself to the narrative of how we ended up with the placement libraries. That context includes Humber College, where we work, which has about normally 33,000 full-time students across 200 different programs. The faculty that Karina and myself are part of has about close to 4,000 students across 17 full-time programs. And they were running, as they all were, I'm sure, full steam ahead. And when mid-March came along and COVID happened, and we basically had the experience of having all of our placements stop. All 500 of our community partners basically did what we did, and that's press pause on doing what they were doing. So the students that were in the correctional facilities, the elementary or high schools, classrooms, the group homes, the day treatment homes, the community centers, you name it, were all suddenly without a place to be. And everyone had to figure out how to shift online, and they had to do that without our students. For me, it was interesting. I've been part of either the social services field or the field of education for 25 years. And we've spent that entire 25 years debating, could we do these things online? Could we teach counseling skills online? Could you teach group communication skills online? Could you even deliver services online? And basically we had to answer those questions during that small time where we did press pause. And the answer so far has been, yes, we can. Agencies had to do the same thing, and they had to figure out how to do their deliveries through a virtual world that we're all still part of today. So what happens next is we find ourselves with just weeks to go in the winter term, and students having not quite the amount of hours they needed to pass their WIL components, to pass their placements and pass their practicums. In the faculty we were a part of, that was about 3,500 students. And we had to quickly figure out, how do we get them across that finish line? One of the things we wanted to do, one of the principles that we operated from right away in FSCS, our faculty, was that no student was to be stranded. No student was to be left behind. We already saw immediately the impacts COVID was having on all of our students, so many things that it was taking away from their experiences and from their lives. And we didn't want graduation to be one of those things. We didn't want their pathway into employment, should those jobs still be there. We wanted to make sure that path was clear. So what we did immediately was to find small projects that students could work on to bridge that gap, to get them there. So in some situations, you're just talking about 25, 35 hours, maybe 50 hours worth of work. And we looked at applied projects that would help them demonstrate the skills that they were needing to demonstrate while in the field. And little did we know, these small projects were the seeds for what would become our project library. So once the term ended, it became clear to us, well, it became clear to the world, that this was going to go on for a lot longer than 2 weeks, that we were in for the long haul here. And while we were able to secure some face-to-face placements and some virtual ones, the vast majority of our partners were still not taking on students last spring. They were still concentrating their efforts on, again, trying to deliver their own services and respond to the crisis that was at hand. So what we did is we decided to create a project library, and that's a collection of ideas that could take the place of formal placements. They're to provide students with these hands-on learning activities that allowed them to demonstrate their field-ready abilities. We did this with 3 steps. The first step we did, and mind you, this all took place over a span of about 2 weeks, but the first step was to bring together a group of dedicated and industrious industry faculty. We all likely have faculty members that are still working in the field. And these are the ones that we tapped on the shoulders and said, come help us, come brainstorm with us. We need to build these projects, and we want them to be connected directly to the field. The second step was to develop an idea bank. We asked this team to load up this idea bank filled with ideas about what's happening in the field. What does the field need? How are they adapting? What are the tools they could use? What would be the most beneficial to the communities that we serve to help them through this pandemic and beyond? And the third step, a really crucial step, was to take these ideas and map the activities to how it is we would evaluate the students on the same learning outcomes they would have in the field. So we had to not just throw an idea at a student, but make sure it was connected to the learning outcomes of the course, connected to the learning outcomes that we needed to measure in order to validate these experiences. Over to Karina.
Thanks. So we've had several iterations of the project library. Our first one was in the summer. Here's an example of our project library for a social service worker program in the fall. There are like not hundreds, but many projects now across our faculty, but this gives you a sense of what it looked like for one program. And so through hosting the Idea Bank sessions, we noticed themes emerging. We saw topics like truth and reconciliation and social isolation, which were applicable in all of our programs, but executed with different lens depending on the discipline and the learning outcomes of the specific program. So some of the projects had the potential to be cross-disciplinary, and while some were program specific. And so here's an example of our child and youth care program project library, where you can see topics that are specific to that field, such as navigating professional relationships in online forums, anti-bullying campaigns. We also partner with our manager of global learning to include a global project where students work together with others from Peru University in India on exchanging best practices in CYC. So you can see the range, and there's so much more. We had a hard time deciding what to include here, but it just goes on, and it was a really exciting thing to kind of see come together. So what's important to note about this whole process is that prior to the pandemic, unless you were enrolled in a marketing course, you were not really, as a student, learning about the professional use of social media, or how to build a website, or how to create a podcast. I mean, students and faculty, they had the knowledge of these pieces from their personal lives and everyday usage, but they didn't know how to bring it or bridge it to working in the field. And as service providers, our partners grappled with how to exist and connect with their clients, we were seeing the need for our students to learn how to build and exchange these ideas in an online capacity. So these projects were more than an essay, not that essays aren't super useful, but we knew that these had to be directly relevant and helpful to the field. And so all the projects that we showed you a moment ago, they were, we had students building podcasts, creating online resource guides, building websites, finding ways to create therapeutic activities and build them in a live session, create tools of practice. So we really wanted to not just have our students practice and build these things, but to also provide our partners with resources on how they can actually be virtual. And we offered these resources to our partners. Derek?
Great. The next step that we wanted to do, as we saw these projects coming to life through the interactions of the faculty and the students over the summer, we wanted to showcase them. So we literally built a showcase document that capitalized on highlighting the best of the best projects that were across all of our programs. We put this document together and we sent it out to our 500 community partners to show them what our students are up to show them how our students have adapted, how we've adapted. And we also used it in our professional advisory council committees. So for each one of our programs in the Ontario College sector must have a program advisory committee that meets twice a year. When we brought them together in the fall, we showed them this document of the wonderful work our students had done and had the students present on these ideas as well. And again, positive, overwhelming support and endorsement of where we were headed from our PACs, and even more interest in terms of wanting to become involved in getting being parts of these projects and developing more unique problem-based ideas as we move forward. On the screen here is just two examples from the document, and I'll try to drop it into the chat so everyone can see it. And if not, feel free to email me and I can send it out as well. On the left, what you see is just a summary of a criminal justice degree group of students who put together a website exploring ways to protest and be active an activist during the pandemic. Last summer was one of great amounts of protests and voices that needed to be heard. And the students felt it was important for people to be able to do this in safe ways. So they put together this website that anyone can access. The second project that was worked on by a group of addictions and mental health graduate students, and they put together a podcast for high school students exploring issues of mental health and burnout. Again, very specific to the moment in time of what everyone was going through, or I should say still going through. So that's just a couple examples of what our students ended up doing and how they ended up using those projects.
So as Derek mentioned, we had such overwhelming positive response from the field with our showcase document, and it started getting creative juices flowing. So partners started to think, hey, like that's a really neat idea that your students created. We need something like that. And so the evolution of our partnership started to take on new life at this point. And we saw that, you know, by the winter, we were co-creating unique projects with the field. And one example that on the left side of the screen is the social media youth health promotion project, where our students worked with community centers to help create targeted messages for youth to wear masks, again, using social media and working as a child and youth care worker with other youth. Another was a resource mapping project, which involves over 40 partners, and it's still ongoing. And so really exciting work relevant to the field. It didn't exist, but you know, we started to share and got a really great response from our partners, which is really exciting for us. So just want to mention that even though we're highlighting and speaking primarily about the project library and how that helped us to evolve, we have maintained throughout this entire experience from I guess, the summer semester, in-person placements where possible, where students feel comfortable, where they want to do in-person work, and where partners are prepared to host students safely. We also, again, are trying to get more remote work for our students, and sometimes we use those things in combination with the project library. So the project library has allowed us to kind of bridge a gap. So some students can't get what they used to get, which would have been 14 hours a week or 35 hours a week of placement experience, but they can supplement with a project and make sure that they're meeting learning outcomes, which is really great and important for us. A lot of work has taken place over the last year for all of us in work integrated learning, no doubt, around the world and across Canada. And I just want to give a shout out to the dedicated team of field placement coordinators that I work with directly, who have continued to roll with and champion the changes that continue to happen. And now our focus in this evolving process is to continue helping the field see the different ways that we can all engage in work integrated learning. And it has shifted. So at the beginning of the presentation, I know Derek and I mentioned, there was a classic placement structure where students had set tasks with our partners. And of course, I'd like to think, and I remember there was always a level of creativity, but nothing like that, what we're experiencing today. And so in addition to that classic placement supervisor role that our partners have held and continue to hold, we also invite our partners to work with us as a project consultant. So inviting them to participate and to join groups that are working on projects and see if that project can be useful for their own organization or communities, and give feedback to our students, because we know that not the bandwidth for a lot of our partners doesn't include supervising students at a regular pace they have in the past. And another way that our partners can engage with us is as project developers. So creating projects, letting us know what the needs are, and then having Humber students, Humber faculty and staff figure out ways that they can that we can join them and co-create together.
So 4 insights that we wanted to share with you. The first is about the culture of learning and innovation that's happening right now. I know that all of us in post-secondary institutions are meant to exist within a culture of learning and innovation, but we have found that this year, more than any, that's come to the forefront. Definitely appreciating moments of that so much work is happening. I know the word burnout is used quite a bit. I know a lot of people are struggling to get to this next finish line of the term and of the year, but also to see and capitalize on the fact that so many interesting and exciting things are going on, and in the field of work integrated learning is just one of them. I think it's important for us to capitalize on this momentum. Like I shared at the beginning, I've spent 25 years wondering how we could do things online. I was trained as a therapist, never thought I'd see the day where everybody would agree that we could teach therapy primarily through an online mechanism, and yet here we are and doing it quite successfully. So I think it's incumbent on all of us in the world of will and the leaders in the world of will to keep this momentum up and build on each other's ideas of innovation to keep going.
Another insight that we had is the growing support, and the support, it's from organizations such as CEWIL that's created such an amazing resource library for all of us working in this sector, in this field, connecting with other colleges and universities to find out what they're doing. But also Humber has over 2,000 employees, and we don't always know all the amazing resources that we have within our own organization. So this whole experience, I've learned a lot. I mean, we have an amazing department called the Idea Lab, where students and faculty can literally get like one-on-one support or book workshops where they can learn how to create a podcast and rent the equipment, how to build websites, how to do a professional presentation. I mean, things that existed before, but that have new meaning now that we are really relying on these tools to make these projects sing. We also are working much more closely with our applied research department, because now that these projects are so unique, we can actually turn them into something that can have a further reach than the classic WIL experiences that we had just a year ago. We also are working with our centers of innovation, community outreach development department. We're working closely with our quality assurance department. I mean, there's so many amazing supports that Humber has, and I imagine that all of our institutions have, and it's been such a privilege to be able to experience those departments in new ways as a result of this. The other insight that we have from this experience is issues of access. Those of us who work in WIL know that WIL has been there have been so many barriers to students participating in work integrated learning, underrepresented groups, having to deal with police checks, immunizations, students with disabilities not being able to get through the interview process, international students with language barriers and distant traveling. There's so many different, I mean, it could be a whole different presentation to discuss issues of access, but definitely this experience has opened up the door for so many students to be able to continue and learn and engage and explore. And that's been a really phenomenal kind of outcome, unintended outcome that I hope will continue.
Thanks, Karina. And the last point we want to make before throwing it over to our colleagues is it's just to be aware of external restrictions. I know that in Ontario, at least, we've been given some permission from the government to change the way that we do WIL during COVID restricted times. And it has given us the parameters to do things like project libraries. It's given us the freedom and the endorsement from the government to do this. At the same time, we have external bodies, accreditation bodies that sometimes don't see things the way we do. Or the way the government is allowing us to go about business in a different way. And you want to pay attention to that, because some of those bodies are asking us to keep with the old school ways of doing WIL and placement, and that don't fit within the creative structures. And you just want to make sure when you are going up for those accreditation pieces that you have all your ducks in order. So that's it from us. We're going to throw over to our colleagues from Brock, Christine, and Laura.
Great. Thank you, Derek and Karina, for walking us through such an interesting presentation and sharing some specific examples from your project library. Laura and I are thrilled to be a part of this conversation, and thanks CEWIL for having us here today to walk you through redefining co-op work term reflection, a collaboration among co-op, career, and experiential education. So as you have already heard, my name is Christine Eaton. I am the Career Development Consultant in the Co-op Education Office at Brock University. In my role, I have redesigned our co-op professional preparation course and most recently led the transition to virtual delivery. Presenting with me today is my colleague, Laura Fife, our Skills Translation Coordinator here at Brock. She has been at the forefront of developing the campus-wide competency framework, which creates a foundation for students to link their academic experiences to employment. Not present today is Carolyn Finlinson, one of our experiential education coordinators, who was instrumental in this project. Her extensive background in community engagement and reflective practice has been invaluable over the course of redefining the Brock Co-op work term reflection process. So in our session this afternoon, we're going to discuss how our team in co-op career and experiential education worked collaboratively and leveraged individual and departmental strengths to improve student learning. We will conclude by presenting, an innovative tool that will allow career practitioners to guide student competency development and reflection. So to give you a bit of background, about 5 years ago, Brock began a conversation about the direction of the departments of co-op education, career education, and the newly formed experiential education. With the support of senior administration, these departments began the process of coming together for the first time with a joint mission, vision, and values. This amalgamation removed unintentional departmental silos and inspired a holistic view of career development based on Brock's career development model. This transition to co-op career and experiential education, known as CCEE, focused on the integration of experiential learning and reflective practice, and created the groundwork for the new initiatives that we will be talking about today. Over to you, Laura.
So research suggests that new graduates often have the career readiness skills that they need to be successful in the workforce. However, they struggle to articulate exactly how their post-secondary education teaches them these skills and competencies. This creates a perceived skills gap between the emerging workforce and labor market expectations. Co-op career and experiential education sought to meet this challenge by launching the Brock Competencies and Skills Translation Project. The project was launched in 2018 to develop and integrate a campus-wide competency framework by intentionally mapping the knowledge, skills, and attributes that students develop through reflection on their curricular and co-curricular experiences. The goal of this project was to introduce a common language around skills and competencies and to embed it into academic and co-curricular experiences with the aim of developing more reflective learners and creating a strong student brand. What makes a Brock student unique? We focused on 3 key sources of information: a Brock student's curricular experiences, co-curricular experiences, and labor market research on skill demand and employer expectations. We created the competencies as one of many tools designed to introduce students to the practice of self-reflection and skills translation by connecting their experiences and skill development to their career journey. We focused on the creation of a common language around skills and competencies, isolated opportunities to embed competency learning across the student experience, and developed ways for students to effectively assess and articulate their competency level. The nearly 2.5-year-long collaborative campus-wide process resulted in the development of 10 Brock competencies. These competencies form the basis of the newly developed student competency development tool and the revised co-op work term reflection process that we're talking about today. Over to you, Christine.
In May 2019, Laura and I were asked to review the existing co-op work term process from our unique lens of career curriculum and competency development. We were to review and update how students formed their learning objectives for their co-op work term by integrating the Brock competencies, thus generating impactful reflective practice. 3 key assumptions framed the development of this project. First, we accepted Ashton Clayton's assumption that reflection is an evidence-based, integrative, analytical, and capacity-building process designed to generate, deepen, and document learning. Second, we established that the Brock competencies would serve as the foundation of co-op students' learning objectives throughout their work term experience. And finally, we acknowledge that learning happens when students are introduced to the competency development and the foundations of impactful reflective practice early in the co-op journey, and are guided through the process of self-evaluation and reflection through regular touch points with both the co-op team and their work term supervisor. We initially set out to review the existing co-op work term process which included the various touch points a co-op student has with our team from initial job search to the end of their work term. We also reimagined how students create their learning objectives, how they communicate these objectives with their supervisor, and how they reflect on their experiences in their final work term report. Our goal was to create continuity for students by creating a common language and clear progression through all the stages of their co-op experience. So our work also included how a co-op student is reviewed and receives feedback from their supervisor. To do this, we incorporated the Brock competencies into each stage of this process. With our project goals formalized, a working group was created to leverage the individual strengths and skills of Laura, our skills translation coordinator, instrumental in the development of the competencies, myself, the career development consultant responsible for introducing reflective practice and competency-based learning to the students in the co-op prep course, and Carolyn, one of our experiential education coordinators, to ensure impactful, effective practice. With the additional research, resources, and expertise, we were able to expand the project goal to include a revision of the entire co-op reflection process and to further incorporate the Brock competencies into each step, beginning with the creation of the student learning objectives through to a student's midpoint reflection, supervisor evaluation, and final work term reflection. Once we created the first draft of the competency development tool, we brought it back to the department for feedback. We then developed and facilitated training sessions to the co-op team to introduce them to the Brock competencies, impactful reflective practice, and our new tool. Recognizing the essential role a student's work term supervisor has in the process of student learning, we wanted to ensure that they, along with our students and staff, were equipped with information and resources needed to engage in impactful reflective practice on the Brock competencies. With this goal in mind, we created a competency development user guide for students, one for staff, and another for our employer partners. Members of the co-op team then shared this newly created resource with a small focus group of employers to solicit their feedback. For our team to impactfully lead students through reflective practice, we had to become reflective practitioners ourselves. Acknowledging that impactful reflection is not an inherent skill, and rather one that must be practiced consistently, we developed training to familiarize our team with the basic principles and to get them comfortable with their own self-reflection. We led the team through Kolb's experiential learning cycle and the different and related types of reflection that can occur. Our goal with the reflective practice training was to focus on the role that reflection plays during, and after experiential learning. Reflecting before an experience prepares students for it. Reflection during allows a student to navigate through the experience, and reflection after helps students examine their assumptions, knowledge, and understanding now that the experience has occurred. We then connected high-quality reflection to all aspects of a Brock co-op student's experience. We wanted our team to encourage students to reflect on both their professional competencies and other domains of learning and experience. A co-op student's work term is only one area which they reflect on. Our goal was for our students to reflect on the entire co-op process, from job search to their final reflection. In order to make concrete connections between the experiential learning cycle and our co-op students, we generated an example that you can see of a realistic student experience during a work term. In this example, a co-op student participates in training on a new database software that they will need to use to complete their tasks. After the training, the student reviews their notes and begins to consider ways that this tool will change how they perform their tasks or role. The student then considers what using this database will look like day to day. They make guesses about how much time their tasks will take or how they will begin to use this tool. Finally, the student opens the software and plays around with the functionality. They adjust their behavior based on their successes or missteps while recalling information about their training. Over to you, Laura.
In the final stage of training, our co-op team was introduced to the brought competencies from the co-op student perspective and to the tool itself. Each co-op student is introduced to the brought competencies and the idea of reflective practice through their participation in the co-op preparation course before their first job search. Once they have secured a work term, students complete a reflection exercise and a self-assessment centered around the brought competencies. And at the midpoint of their work term, students will complete another self-reflection and revisit their stated learning objectives, providing an update on their learning progress. At this point, they may adjust the specific competencies they wish to develop if their roles and responsibilities do not align with their stated learning objectives. At this time, the co-op team will meet with both the student and their work term supervisor and complete a midpoint questionnaire that is also based on the brought competencies. At the conclusion of their work term, students will update their learning objectives as necessary and reflect on their learning progress throughout the work term. Their supervisors will then complete an evaluation of the student focused again on the 10 brought competencies. We're now going to walk through the competency development tool from the student perspective. To begin the self-assessment process, the student will review the user guide created specifically for them to refamiliarize themselves with the brought competencies and with reflective practice. They will learn that the competency development tool is designed to help them generate a deeper awareness of themselves, their values, and their professional skill set in the context of their co-op work term. The student is instructed in how to self-assess their skill level, how to create learning objectives using the competency development tool, and how and when to approach their co-op work term supervisor to discuss their learning objectives. The student is first instructed to carefully read through the definition of each competency and its associated level descriptions that you can see here, levels 1 through 4. They will then select the appropriate level based on their self-reflection in all 10 competencies. After completing the assessment and determining their results, the student will utilize this information to help them determine the specific competencies they wish to develop during their work term. This is an example of a possible student self-assessment. Looking at the competency apply knowledge, this student has rated themselves at a level 3. As you can see, each level is presented to students in first-person language to help them more easily connect their own experience to each competency. Once a student has completed the self-assessment for all 10, they are instructed to consider their upcoming work term and select 3 competencies they wish to further develop. They are encouraged to think of specific goals that could improve their development of these skills, and they are prompted to consider if their goals are realistic in their place of work and how they could be applied to their daily routine, tasks, and responsibilities. With regular touch points between co-op students and the brought co-op team, students are encouraged to refer to their initial competency self-assessment throughout their work term, returning to it in conversation with their supervisor, in creating and refining learning objectives, in reflecting on their learning experiences, and in completing their midpoint and final work term report. Students will be regularly prompted with questions about when they typically find themselves reflecting and their experiences of reflecting before, during, and after a moment of learning in their work term. Our goal is to have students understand that reflection on their competencies can be an opportunity to reevaluate what they know and how they have learned prior to, during, and after an experience. Reflection after a work term experience is a wonderful time to consider what has changed or what has been reinforced for a student as an employee or team member and as a learner. We designed the competency development tool to help our students engage in critical thinking about their career journey and as a resource to help them consider and to make decisions about where they will go next and who they are now that they have had the brought co-op experience. I'll end here today by sharing some observations about the process of developing this tool. The experience of creating a tool to facilitate meaningful student reflection turned out to be a perfect opportunity for our team to reflect on our own skills and competencies, as well as our ability to navigate challenge and change. We faced significant challenges throughout the process that we were able to overcome through the strength of our departmental collaboration. We experienced several instances of an expansion of the scope of the project, requiring us to reevaluate our objectives and reach out for support from other members of our team. We also experienced the technological difficulties inherent in both transitioning to a virtual delivery model as a result of the pandemic and the difficulties of migrating a framework onto a technological platform. Throughout the process, we had to reevaluate who our audience for this project was. It began solely as a resource for students, but expanded to include our co-op team and our employer partners. This meant a great deal of collaboration, resource sharing, and external consultation to ensure that we crafted a tool that would benefit all stakeholders in the co-op process. Our next steps for this project include the first full year of incorporating the co-op competency development tool into the student work term process, including transferring the tool into the online platform and, most importantly, receiving feedback from our students, staff, and employer partners. This will mean a continued dialogue with the co-op team and all those who interact directly with our students. Continuing our collaborative efforts, this tool is now also being adapted for use across the entire department as a mechanism for students to self-assess their skills and competencies, create clear learning objectives, and engage in impactful reflective practice before, during, and after their career experiences. Taking time to reflect ultimately makes us better learners through our academic, professional, and daily lived experience. Our goal is to provide students with that time and the support they need along their career journey. On behalf of the whole team here at Brock, Christine and I would like to thank you for joining us today as we share our collaborative approach to redefining the co-op work term reflection.
Wow, thank you so much, Laura, Christine, Karina, and Derek, for your very relevant and timely presentations. You're all dealing with questions that I think many of us are grappling with. How do we do this work in a global pandemic? How do we help students to recognize and articulate their learning from experience? So we have about 15 minutes for questions. So I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Nicole Natarozny to see if there's any questions in the chat. If you have any questions, you can either pop up your virtual hand or pop it in the chat. Nicole?
Thank you very much, Erin. I do see that there was one question in the chat that Kara answered. And so Katie had asked, in addition to these reflective pieces, and this was for the second talk, is a site visit also part of the work term? And Kara had simply indicated that, yes, that was a part of it. Next we have Danica Matovic, and I apologize, Danica, if I'm saying your name incorrectly. I do see your question there. Since it is an open forum today, if you're interested in turning on your camera, you can ask that question yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. I apologize, I'm in running gear. I did go for a run at lunchtime, so that's why I had my camera off, but I would love to ask the question for Karina and Derek. You talked about a repository that you had made to let students know about available projects when you had some of your placements canceled externally. And I just wanted to know more about that. For example, was an existing system used? Do you see that happening post-COVID and continuing on? And yeah, just would love to know more about it.
Sure, I can answer. Thanks for asking that question, Danica. I'm glad you went for a run. That's a good thing. Don't be sorry. You don't need to get out. Yeah, so we just used a very simple mechanism of, we use PDFs. We also made them, we always make all of our documents accessible for those who require using readers. And we would post and attach a survey that students can kind of click through and indicate their top interests. And then our team would go through and kind of share with faculty before the course starts, saying, here are the projects that students are most interested in. So it's just a PDF document or a Word document that they can flip through. And your second question is if we think we're going to continue using it. For sure. I mean, we had a hard time at the beginning trying to get students to recognize the value of these projects because they weren't placements at the very onset. But then we found ways to connect our partners to the work. And as we evolve, we do hope to have more virtual opportunities directly with partners. But these projects are so fantastic because they can really help supplement if something goes wrong. We're constantly going back and forth with lockdown, no lockdown, or a student who's sick, or different things happen in life. And these projects just allow us to keep moving forward with our students. So we plan on keeping them around and evolving them every semester.
Danica, thanks for the questions too. I dropped the showcase document into the chat. Anyone can grab it there. And I know it's not exactly what you're asking for, but it is a document that has lots and lots of the ideas themselves.
Yes, I definitely plan on going through it, but after the call.
Sure.
Thank you. The next question is for Derek, and I just have an email address here. It says H. Workman. And so if you would like to turn on your camera and ask that question, that would be great. Otherwise, I can read the question for you. And I apologize that I can't figure out who H. Workman is.
Sorry, Nicole, it's Heather Workman from Langara. Need to fix that.
Thanks, Heather.
Sorry about that. Hi, Derek. Great presentation, everyone. So, Derek, I'm just wondering, do you have the project library in a system or on a platform that everybody can see, or is it just the department that's doing the matching? Like, is it something that the entire campus can see and can get ideas out of themselves and build on that, or is it just closed for your department to use with the assignment?
Sure, I'm going to throw it to Karina because I think there's two answers: what we're using now and potential for what we might use in the future. So.
Yeah, what we're using now, and that's a great question, is our idea bank led to some ubiquitous projects that were shared with all programs, and then each program kind of made adjustments to make it program specific. So we do have like a standard project library that can be used across all of our programs, but when we share these projects with students, they actually are program specific. So in advance of each term, we share with students summaries of the projects that they can then review and select from. But I love the idea of making it something that can sit on its own. And Derek, were you going to add to that?
No, that's good. I mean, we are in the process of placing, I shared a PDF document that's a magazine of the projects themselves in their final form that we were using as in part as an artifact for students as well to take with them, but also an artifact for us to share to solicit other ideas. We have intentions to have that live on our website as well, so that there can be a digital artifact for students to refer back to, and for us to promote forward to agencies who might want to interact with us in a very unique way. As Karina mentioned earlier, there's different ways to engage in placements, and I think this is a nice yet one more way to get our industry partners on board.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
I kind of had a question just to follow from that. So when you have your project library, do the students get to select what they're interested in, or is it more the instructor or professor that would actually assign specific projects or topics to students? What is how does that work effectively? I imagine it probably is different depending on the focus, if it's science versus social sciences, whatever, but I was curious as to how that developed.
Yeah, it's really a combination. So we like our students to have a chance to review the projects, and we use the survey for them to indicate their top 3 choices. And then we kind of see if there's a pattern. So we share that information with faculty, and faculty will kind of build the groups based on student interest. So we try to diversify the projects so that we can provide more to the field and give students a chance to explore different things, because they share back in their groups also. So we want them to have a diverse experience.
We kind of ran into the opposite problem that we thought we'd have last summer when we launched these project libraries, and that all the students wanted to do them. They were really excited to take on these tasks and whatnot. And we did have a need for placements, in-person placements. And in fact, I run a project during the summer involving 15 local community gardens, and was hoping to have lots and lots of our students join me and get their hands dirty. But the interest was so high in the project library that we ended up turning to other faculties for those students. So,
wow,
a good sign.
For sure. Well, thank you. The next question on our list comes from Kim Strandon. And Kim, if you'd like to turn your camera on and ask your question, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I was just wondering about the competency piece, and do you provide the co-op students with the competencies, or do they create their own?
Thanks, Kim. I'll answer that question. So to begin, I'll just say that the broad competencies were created under the assumption that a competency is a combination of knowledge, skills, abilities, and attributes. So we do provide the students with the 10 broad competencies, but throughout the process of reflection and developing their goals, we encourage students to explore the competencies and what those mean to them through the lens of maybe the skills that they're looking to develop that are associated with a competency like apply knowledge. What does that mean for that student? student in the moment that they're in, approaching their work term. So the competencies are designed intentionally to be very broad and can be tailored then to each individual student's experience.
Great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Christine.
I just wanted to add to that piece as well, Kim. The students are introduced to the Brock competencies throughout the 12-week co-op professional preparation course, and they're really embedded within the topics that they're learning, and to start to make that real connection between what their academics are teaching them, what their experiential opportunities or experiences are teaching them, and what the course is as well, so that they're already familiarized with it prior to beginning their job search. And so we're really, incorporating common language and common threads for the students, so that it's not something that they have to then all of a sudden quickly learn when they're starting their co-op job search or in their first co-op work term. So I just wanted to add that piece onto what Laura had mentioned.
Our next question fits really well into this. And Adam Rook, if you would like to turn your camera on, I'm looking forward to hearing the answer to this one as well.
Is that working there? Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, folks. That was great. Excited to learn. My question was, what approach did you take to developing the content within each level? Within that kind of rubric there, because I think that can be a really tough thing to do, is differentiating between advancement within a competency. So I was curious what approach you took to kind of choosing the specific language that you did for at least the example that you showed us there.
I can start and address this, and Christine can fill in any gaps, but this is where our colleague Carolyn would be able to shine here, because her role as experiential education coordinator is deeply grounded in both a variety of different pedagogies, including assessment, self-assessment, and reflective practice, but then also specifically student learning through experiential opportunities. So we created the specific language for this document with the co-op student perspective in mind. So we wrote this specifically for students going into a work term, whether that be virtual or in person at a place of work, and working through their learning via those experiences, and also in partnership with their co-op work term supervisor. So creating the language specific to these levels was simpler in essence because we were doing it for a specific population of students. But to your point, it is of course a challenge to accurately determine levels based on something that is so open to interpretation, that is very broad. So what we did is we again used a collaborative approach. We worked with colleagues throughout our department who have a lot of experience in that realm, who are certified teachers, who lead students through self-assessment and reflection and a variety of different experiences. And we also did a lot of research about different types of assessment rubrics and self-assessment rubrics, and tried to position our language to directly to the student experience, but then also there is no hard and fast version of what level 1 looks like versus what level 4 looks like. And this is where students really engage in that part of reflection, where they can determine where they fall. They can fall in the middle of two. They might not identify one or the other. And that's sort of part of the reflection process as we envisioned it. Christine, is there anything that I left out there?
Oh, I think you covered it well. Thanks, Laura.
Our next question is from Carolyn Lodge. And Carolyn, if you wanted to turn your camera on, and the floor is yours.
Sure. I apologize. I'm also part of that lunchtime workout crew. My question, this is so fabulous, but I'm wondering about the employer participation in the reflection, in the report, in the process. Was there sort of any minimum baseline of participation that they were required to do? Was it up to the employer or the different work terms?
Good question. I can take that to start, Laura, and then if you have anything to add. So we did start with a small focus group of employers to gauge their willingness to adapt to our reflective practice type of competency-based common document, I guess, or way of assessing or evaluating our students throughout all of their work terms. The feedback that we received from the employers that we did share it with, they were pretty willing to incorporate, because we were going to look at redefining the entire evaluation process that we currently ask for them to complete. Some do have their own evaluation or assessments that they obviously use for our students' development and performance. However, we were hoping that by redefining or recreating that document, that it would just take place of what they currently are being required or asked to complete for our students. With the user guide that we developed as well, we made sure that we very clearly laid it out in simple steps to follow, and that it's not a more onerous expectation or process for them, and that falls a lot to the student in the creation of their own learning objectives and tying it to the Brock competencies and this competency development tool, and to have that conversation and initiate those ongoing conversations with their supervisors so they know, and it's very well understood on both sides, what they're looking to develop or further strengthen in these areas, and what opportunities in the role that they have accepted or are currently working in, what opportunities do they have to strengthen or develop, what potential opportunities could they have if there's something, that is available and the student is able to participate in, that the employer may want to consider allowing them an opportunity to do. So we're not looking to have another expectation of our employers. It more so is to replace what we currently or had been using in the past, and just to kind of have that main thread of language and content and concepts for the student and employers throughout all the work terms. So looking at them in their first work term, choosing what competencies that they want to strengthen or develop, and then second work term, other competencies or, further development in these areas if perhaps that they didn't have an opportunity to strengthen or develop, or maybe, want another chance in a different area if it's with the same employer, right? So really looking at it being a scaffolding process throughout for the student, as well as for the employer to support the student in where they're at and where their individual learning is happening based on whatever co-op work term opportunity they have. Did you have anything to add, Laura?
Only that the employers are huge partners in this process, and that we are engaging in continuous conversations with them, making sure that the work that we do, including the competencies themselves, are grounded in the information that tells us what employers are actually looking for. So we're hoping to help employers bridge that gap between a student as a learner to a student as an impactful member of a workplace, and using this tool and making it clear to our employer partners that this is what they're looking for, and we're looking to help them help our students and to make engaged, ready learners and new members of the workforce.
Fabulous, thank you.
Thank you, Christine and Laura. I'm cognizant of time. It's 11:57 a.m. and I do see that there are more questions in the chat. Libby, Mark, Natalie, to name a few. And we were should be wrapping up at this point in time, recognizing that other folks probably have commitments coming up. So Erin, I'm not sure how you think we should approach this. Perhaps, yeah, the questions are awesome, and I would be interested in those answers. So I'm not sure if Andrew can suggest a way that, that information can then be shared as a group, but I'll hand the floor over to you, Erin.
Sure. We've done in one of our previous sessions, when there were one of the EDI sessions, we can compile those questions and share them with our presenters today. And if they're open to it, responding, and then we can share those responses with our registrants today. So if that will work, I think I saw some of the presenters suggest like reaching out directly to them. And I anticipate that this is the beginning of many conversations. And wow, I wish we were having these conversations in Newfoundland. We were supposed to be in St. John's. We're not. We will get there. But can you imagine the conversations if we were mingling together? We are so deeply grateful to our presenters today for sharing your willingness to take time and share some of the work that you're doing and grappling with. And when it is safe, we will gather again in St. John's to continue sharing the work that we do. I want to thank Andrew at Redstone for his support with registration and e-blasts and website content. as well as to Nicole and the presenters today. We're so grateful for these contributions to the WIL community. And you know, much of CEWIL's work is led by volunteers. We just celebrated Volunteer Week. There is a whole crew behind the scenes, from the conference committee to the PD committee. We get feedback from the board, to our MUN colleagues who have trusted us with this series and who can, you know, they hustled to present or to come up with a conference, and then they hustled again to pivot, and they're going to hustle again to pivot yet again, you know, because it's 2021. So lastly, I really hope we'll see you next month for our final webinar in this series. Details will be released very shortly. I popped a link in the chat. The PD committee is very grateful for any feedback that you have. This informs our future offerings to the CEWIL committee. So thank you so much again, and I look forward to our continued conversations.